Well, if you consider how Bermuda started in the captive business, it's been a place to innovate. Captives themselves were an innovation. So it's no surprise that the industry has grown around constant innovation in order to meet the demands of the client base. Bermuda has grown in terms of its reinsurance and insurance market to a very substantial extent. So has government support for those facilities, and of course the regulator, the Bermuda Monetary Authority, both in terms of headcount but as well as international standing. We have benefited consequently with an enormous growth in intellectual capital. The major brokers are all here in substance and in numbers and support the industry full tilt. So the whole market is tuned to responding to the needs of its client base. And as a consequence, what has grown in Bermuda are obviously the classic extensions from captives, which include group captives, rent-a-captives, so-called, and as a consequence of those, segregated cell regulations and statutes which allow for a very mature market and a very flexible market to meet the needs of its clients. Obviously, an extension of segregated account companies has been the convergence or the use of those types of companies to converge with financial operators to provide so-called ILS products, which is a part of the growing demand for our clients and has been a very successful part of Bermuda's continued growth in that industry. The U.S. is a big consumer of Bermuda insurance products. They are amongst the most likely consumers as well of our innovative approach to solutions for their problems. As a consequence, we've expanded the role of segregated accounts generally, so that not just insurers, but also, for instance, mutual funds and others can facilitate and use the segregated account machinery, often together to provide solutions. That's why ILS has been very successful and provided a very useful channel for funds such as pension funds to invest in non-correlated assets such as insurance, where they could not otherwise invest because they're not rated. Equally, they are also used for nuts and bolts cures for problems, as well as for new demands for services such as the consequences of Obamacare, which has generated open season in many ways for the providers of health insurance for employees throughout the U.S., and Bermuda has been a beneficiary of new structures for that as well.
I think the two key elements of the Bermuda captive market is that there's longevity, but also innovation in the market. The first captive insurers were set up here back in the late 1950s, so we've had over 60 or 70 years of captives being established and built up on the island. That longevity means that we've got a very strong intellectual capital base here on the island, so we have good service providers in terms of the insurance managers, law firms, accountants, bankers, and the other persons that are required to enable clients to set up and to continue to manage captives on the island. We also have a very well-established regulator, the Bermuda Monetary Authority, that has over the years developed a strong regulatory regime for captives. So that longevity has basically meant that we've got a great infrastructure for people that are looking to set up on the island. In terms of innovation, the regulator has been key in terms of developing the Insurance Act and the regulations under that act. We have very much a risk-based regulatory regime. So the regulation is determined according to the nature of the insurer, the sort of risk they're writing, And so a captive, for example, will be less regulated than the large-scale reinsurance companies that we see on the island. And those regulations have been developed over a long period of time since the Insurance Act was set up in 1978. And we have classifications of insurers so that each insurer has basically different regulations that apply to the nature of its business. So I think you've got those key elements basically of a long-standing insurance market with all the key players here on the island, but you've also got a market that is continuing to sort of evolve and develop new products to reflect what clients are looking for. I think it's important to think of Bermuda as an offshore financial centre and not a tax haven. I think it's very easy for people onshore to lump together offshore jurisdictions and just give them the tax haven tag. Bermuda is a long-established offshore financial centre with a large insurance and reinsurance industry. The reinsurance industry is the third largest in the world. And so Bermuda has always had a high degree of regulatory oversight for both its insurance industry and other industries established on the island. So in terms of reacting, if you like, to global pressures from global regulators, the island has always been at the forefront of that. We are on the OECD's whitelist as a result of having tax information exchange agreements with a large number of jurisdictions. On the insurance side, we're looking to have Solvency II equivalents and to have the captive insurance market carved out of the Solvency II requirements. And our regulator, the Bermuda Monetary Authority, is actively engaged with other global regulators to ensure that we're meeting the highest level of standards. And as I said, we always have done that. Bermuda has had a high disclosure level compared to other jurisdictions. It's always been the case that someone wishing to set up on the island has had to disclose the ultimate beneficial ownership of the company, and we continue to have that obligation so that the regulators understand who is doing business on the island.